When Japan launched the Yamato, she was meant to terrify the world. At 45,000 tons of iron and ambition, she was the biggest battleship ever built. To Japanese planners, she was a floating fortress. But from the moment her hull touched the water, her armor carried a fatal contradiction that no amount of steel could fix. The design team at Korea Naval Arsenal wanted her to survive anything the United States could throw. So they created a protective scheme built around brute force. Massive belt armor, deep torpedo bulges, and triple-layered magazines inside a citadel of steel. On paper, she was invincible. In practice, that same invincibility would trap her crew when the war moved faster than the designers imagined. This obsession with armor wasn't random. By the 1930s, every navy was locked in a race between bigger guns and thicker plates. Each round of improvements forced ships to grow. More displacement meant more armor. More armor meant heavier support frames, and the heavier the ship became, the more the design collapsed under its own weight. Japan pushed this cycle farther than anyone. But heavy armor wasn't just add more steel. Producing face-hardened plates over half a meter thick stretched Japan's metallurgical limits. Some plates had uneven hardness or fine internal cracks. Shipyard cranes had to be upgraded because the armor sections were too heavy for existing gantries. Every step added weight, lowering freeboard and baking in vulnerabilities long before the ship ever sailed. Her armor pushed her deep into the water, giving her an unnaturally low profile. Sailors joked she carried the ocean on her shoulders. That low freeboard meant a single torpedo could flood whole runs of compartments because the water had nowhere to disperse. Electrics failed, pumps drowned, and when pumps died, compartments followed. A petty officer recalled the hull groaning like something alive when she turned hard at speed. It wasn't a metaphor. The armor belt stressed the hull so severely that the frame flexed under load. Engineers worried about this years before the ship saw combat. The second paradox was deadlier. Yamato's armor was built for an age of long-range gun duels. She was optimized to defeat 15-inch shells fired from the horizon. But the Pacific War shifted. Air power, not battleships, ruled the ocean. Her armor could stop shells. But bombs and torpedoes attacked from angles her belt wasn't built to handle. Shock waves crushed pumps. Flooding destroyed generators. Control lines snapped in sealed chases hidden behind armored bulkheads. The ship remained intact, while her internal systems collapsed one by one. Her crew sensed this weakness long before her final voyage. Compartments were so isolated that moving through the ship felt like navigating a steel labyrinth. Ventilation struggled. Condensation dripped constantly. Heat built in the lower decks, often above 40 degrees Celsius. The ship was a fortress, but one that trapped its defenders. And by 1945, those defenders were no longer the elite sailors Yamato was built for. This is one of the great hidden truths of her story. Japan's early war battleships were crewed by some of the best sailors in the world. Veterans of peacetime gunnery schools and long sea tours. By the time Yamato sailed her final mission, many of those men were gone. Their replacements were young, some barely out of training. AA gunners had only weeks on the ship before she sailed. Radar operators were new recruits with minimal instruction. Engine room crews came from smaller vessels and had never managed turbines of Yamato's scale. A senior petty officer later said, "The ship was huge, but the experience inside her was thin." This mattered. A battleship is only as strong as the men who fight her. In 1945, Yamato had the body of a giant and the heartbeat of a crew that had no time to master her complexity. By the end of the war, Japan's high command knew Yamato had no strategic value. Fuel was scarce. Carrier aviation was shattered. American radar outclassed every Japanese system. Yet the ship still carried symbolic weight. She represented pride, endurance, and the fading illusion that Japan still controlled its destiny. Operation Ten-Go turned that illusion into desperation. Yamato would sail to Okinawa with almost no air cover. Her orders were simple: beach herself and fight as a stationary gun battery until destroyed. Her crew understood the truth. It was a one-way mission. On April 7th, Yamato faced the full strength of American carrier aviation. Her AA guns filled the sky with red tracers, so dense that survivors said the air looked stitched with fire. But each torpedo hammered her low compartments. Lists grew. Machinery jammed. Turrets starved for power. Lights died. And the armor that should have kept the crew alive now sealed them inside the darkness. The second wave hit harder. Bombs tore through the superstructure. The port side took torpedo after torpedo. The ship leaned, then leaned farther. Below, sailors worked in total blackout. They felt the ship dying through the deck plates, a slow, rhythmic shudder. As damage control faltered, Yamato's final paradox took shape. Her magazine protection was so strong, so tightly armored, that once flooding reached the wrong angles, pressure built without escape. The final torpedo pushed water into critical compartments. There was a long, deep tremor. Then, the battleship erupted in a towering blast visible for miles. Nearly 3,000 men were lost. Most never reached daylight. The armor meant to protect them became their steel tomb. Yamato did not die because she was weak. She died because she belonged to a world already gone. Her protection made sense in an age of gunnery duels. In an age of air power, it sealed her fate. That is the final paradox of the greatest battleship ever built. The steel meant to save her crew became the steel that ensured almost none would return home.